In a previous video, we animated our vehicle driving from one side of the bridge to the other. We added a little swerve in the middle. In this video, we're going to add some more animation to some other vehicles. So first, let's edit these keyframes on our current vehicle. As you see, the swerve happens in the middle of our timeline from around frame 44 to 75. If I wanted to alter some of these keyframes, I can do that simply by right-clicking on them, and you'll see I get the option to delete the keyframe or copy and paste the keyframe somewhere else. For right now, I'm just going to delete this keyframe. Now, when I deleted this keyframe, I deleted the marker in time that told the vehicle it needed to be pointed straight forward in this location. So now, as I scrub, you'll see Maya transitions from the start pose to the next keyframe where the vehicle was turned sideways. If I hold Shift and left click, I can highlight regions of my timeline. I can now shift these keyframes from side to side in the timeline, making them happen either earlier or later. Or I can scale them in the timeline, making the actions happen slower. Now if we hit play, you'll see that the vehicle kind of slows down in the middle and then speeds back up at the end. I can also highlight this range of keyframes and right-click and delete them. So now we're back to kind of where we started, with our car just driving from one side of the bridge to the other. Now, I want you to notice as the car starts driving, it seems to be pulling out. It seems as if the driver is in park at the beginning of this animation and then starts to accelerate forward. Now at the end of the animation, you'll notice it feels like the driver is starting to press the brake and slow to a stop. So why is that happening, and how can we change that? I would like this animation to feel as if the motion was happening before the video started and the motion continues to happen after the video is over. To do that, we're going to need to use a different tool called the Graph Editor. We can find the Graph Editor in a couple of different ways. If I go to Windows, Animation Editors, Graph Editor, and click there, this will open up our Graph Editor in a separate window. We can also find the Graph Editor by going to our workspace settings and changing my workspace to the animation view. When I do that, it opens the Graph Editor along the bottom of my screen so I can see both my viewport and my Graph Editor together. Our car is driving from one side of the screen to the other side of the screen. On frame 1, our Translate X channel is set to 27.629. If I go to frame 120, you'll see our Translate X channel is negative 31.94. That means when our car is moving, it's moving in the Translate X direction. We can see that if we open this up, we'll see that Translate X is changing. Right? And over time, it is transitioning from from 27 to negative 31. So, how does Maya determine where the object should be on frame 60? The Graph Editor answers that question. If I choose the Translate X channel, you'll see that Maya generated a curve for the entire motion. At the beginning of this, on frame 1, is the value 27. At the end of this, on frame 120, is the value negative 31. To figure out where the object should be on frame 60, Maya just derived the value of negative 1.78 from this curve that was generated in the Graph Editor. Now, most people don't find curves particularly exciting. It's much more exciting to be in here moving around objects, but this curve allows us to have precise control of how our object moves. First, let's kind of talk about how this graph is organized. As you'll see, as I move from side to side, I'm moving through time. So when I'm on this side of the screen in my graph editor, I'm on frame 1. And as I move forward, I'm moving forward in time. So our graph from side to side is time. Our graph up and down is the value that is in this channel. So you'll see that we start off on 27, and then that value begins to decline until we get into the negative numbers with negative 31.94. So as we go up and down in our graph, that number is represented by the number in our Translate X channel. So to control the way this transition happens, we can alter this graph. You'll probably notice that I can select a keyframe in here, and I can move that keyframe. If I move this keyframe from side to side, I'm making that keyframe happen at a different time. If I move that keyframe up and down, I'm changing the value in Translate X. I can move these just by left-clicking our mouse, or if I have the keyframe selected, I can middle-click anywhere and move the keyframe that way. I personally prefer the middle-click method because that means I don't have to be very precise about how I choose the keyframe. You'll also notice that this keyframe has two lines that extend out from each side of it. Inside of Maya, we call this a Bezier handle or a tangent. The tangent allows us to control the way this curve transitions in and out of each keyframe. So if I select the tangent and middle click, you'll see that I can change the way this curve interpolates. If I create a curve something like this, you'll see my car is going to go past its stopping point and then come back to its stopping point. So if I hit play, we'll learn a lot more about the graph editor and editing tangents later. For right now, we just want our car to seem like it is continually moving forward and backward. So I'm going to select both of my keyframes, and along the top of our graph editor, we have a couple of options that will automatically set our tangents to different presets. By default, Maya sets them to auto tangents. And with this, we were getting a subtle acceleration and deceleration at the beginning and ending of this curve. If you want to zoom in where you can see this better, we can hold Alt and right click to zoom in and out, or we can hold Shift Alt and right click to zoom in and out on one axis. If we zoom in closely here, you'll see as we're approaching this stopping point, Maya eases to a stop. The change in this value decelerates, and the difference in change between frames 19 and 20 is much smaller than the difference in change between frames 60 and 61. So if I click this button, it will frame our entire curve. And the way I would like to change that is by selecting both of these keyframes and clicking this button. What this will do is set our tangents to linear. It means they'll be pointing at each other, and so Maya's going to interpret this motion as a straight line transition. Now you'll notice if I hit play, it feels like the car is already moving at the beginning, and it feels like it's going to continue moving at the end. It's important to note that clicking linear is not going to fix every animation that you do. Every animation is different and requires a different type of interpolation in the curve. This is just another tool that allows you to have more precise control on how things look inside of Maya.